Merry Christmas. I hope everyone has a very safe day and a very fun day. This year for Christmas, I decided, for the reading, I'm going to bring back a classic from many of our childhoods, plus a new tale in the same world. Of course, let's start with the classic. This is How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Suess. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. The Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm, lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas. It's practically here. Then he growled, with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake up bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise. Oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise. Noise, noise, noise. And then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, feast, feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together, with Christmas bells ringing, and they'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the Grinch, and the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do. The Grinch laughed in his throat. And he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked. What a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like St. Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around. But since reindeer are scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No. The Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, "Giddy up," and the sleigh started down toward the homes where the Whos lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, "This is stop number 1," the old Grinchy Claus hissed. He climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue. With the little Who stockings all hung in a row, "These stockings," he grinned, "are the first things to go." Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimbley. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned the Grinch, "I will stuff up the tree." And the Grinch grabbed the tree and started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know what? That old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and she went and sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. And then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their wall he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tiptoe to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's. He was grinchishly humming, They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch. I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear, and he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so. But it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing, without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, somehow or other. It came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. Then he puzzled 3 hours, till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light. And he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Such an iconic Christmas story. I remember growing up listening to the story, being told in school, and then, of course, grew up with the old cartoon, narrated by the Earl Ravencroft? I think so. And, of course, the Jim Carrey version. Now, this is a newer book. It came out this year. Don't start rhyming. And it's the sequel to How the Grinch Stole Christmas. And it's called How the Grinch Lost Christmas. And this is what made me decide to do both books this year. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Lost Christmas. Up high on Mount Crumpet, just north of the Who's, a Who just delivered the day's Whoville news. The cave on Mount Crumpet was home to the Grinch, who sprung from his cave just enough, plus 1 inch, to stare down at Whoville from high up above it. Tomorrow was Christmas, and speaking thereof it, my heart, grinned the Grinch, has grown to quite love it. The Grinch had been patiently waiting all year to celebrate Christmas and bring the Who's cheer. And to show every Who he was different now. I've changed, thought the Grinch. I'll prove it. But how? While eating his breakfast of Who hash on rye, the newspaper there in the chair caught his eye. A contest in Whoville, tomorrow at 3, to see who can make the most Christmassy tree. Then he got an idea. A crafty idea. The Grinch got an awfully crafty idea. He laughed in his throat. I know just what to do. Then the Grinch grabbed a pencil and drew. With a plan in his head, the Grinch hiked to Who Wood, where he found the most Christmassy tree that he could. and he chopped at the tree with his tree-chopping axe. Till the tree he was chopping fell down next to Max. Then they hiked their way home with the tree on their backs. Our cellar has all of the things we will use to start decorating our tree for the Who's. Grab ribbons, he shouted. Grab bunches of bows. Grab plenty of these and a pile of those. Bring everything reddish and everything greenish, and every last colorful thing in betweenish. I'll win, 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 win. He was grinchiously humming. Then all of a sudden he heard someone coming. Now who could that be? The Grinch said with a sneer. He turned around fast, and who should appear? Right there in the hall stood Cindy Lou Who, the sweetest of all Who's that he knew. "Hello," she exclaimed. "I have something to ask. I do hope it isn't a bothersome task. I've come here to ask a small favor, you see. If you have time, and could make one for me?" The Grinch interrupted her tiny request. "My dear," he replied, "it would really be best to ask me tomorrow on Christmas, you see. Right now I must finish my prize-winning tree." "Perhaps I could help you," sweet Cindy Lou said. But the Grinch simply patted the Who on her head. Then he shooed her outside and replied, "Don't be silly. Do run along home now, before it gets chilly." Throughout the whole day, and late into the night, he worked on that tree, till that tree was just right. "I've done it," he shouted. "It's perfectly grand. I hope that it shows every Who in the land what wonderful Christmassy spirit I've found. I know in my heart that I'm sure to be crowned." At 1/4 dawn, with the sun rising fast, the Who's were awake. It was Christmas at last. The bells around Whoville were ringing and dinging. The Who's down in Whoville were merrily singing. The Grinch ran outside and cried, "Christmas is here!" At the sound of that ringing and singing along cheer. And when the time came for the Grinch to depart, he loaded the sleigh and took off like a dot, sledding down, 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 down to the Whoville town square. "Contestants," the Grinch heard the mayor declare, "it's time for the judges to judge all your trees. The rest of you Who's, have a seat if you please." And the trees were lined up from the tallest to the smallest. The Grinch's tall tree was the tallest of allest. And down at the end, to the far, far, far right, was Cindy Lou Who's, with its much smaller height. When the mayor announced who had taken third place, the Grinch felt his Christmas-filled heart start to race. "And now," the mayor said, "without further ado, the lucky contestant who placed number 2 lives high on Mount Crumpet. We're thrilled that he's here. The Grinch wins the second-place trophy this year." The Grinch felt a shock as his heart turned ice cold. He felt it starting shrinking. And so it is told that there in the square all the Who's who were near it are certain they saw it, and sure they could hear it. The moment the Grinch lost his Christmassy spirit, his arms started itching, his legs started twitching, then both of his eyes started twitching and itching. And that Christmas-filled heart, it shrank down. "I've been robbed," the Grinch snarled, "and I'm through with this town." The Grinch stuffed his tree in his ramshackle sleigh. Then he lugged it and tugged it and hauled it away. As Max tried his hardest to get him to stay, the Who's were all speechless, unsure what to say. The Grinch climbed and climbed, his heart grew more frozen. Well, back at the contest, a winner was chosen. Today, on the merriest day in the land, the mayor declared, with his hoo-horn in hand, I give you our winner. She's not more than 3. It's Cindy Lou who has made the best tree. The Who Girl had asked every Who there that day to make her an ornament she could display, to celebrate Whoville and everyone in it. She entered the contest not thinking she'd win it. The Grinch heard the mayor from high on the peak. Then Cindy Lou Who grabbed the Who-horn to speak. I wanted to make all of Whoville a tree, with ornaments each of you Who's made for me. But there is one ornament missing, you see. The whole town of Whoville was there on each limb, except for the Grinch. So she called out to him, Now please, Mr. Grinch, I saved you a spot. You're someone we Who's like awfully a lot. This tree is for Whoville. You're part of it, too. I hope you can hear me, said Cindy Lou Who. Cindy Lou's voice stopped the Grinch in his tracks. He looked down at Whoville, then looked down at Max. I thought, the Grinch puzzled, a prize-winning tree would prove to the Who's what today means to me, and show them for certain I truly belong, but perhaps I was wrong, and belonged all along, and maybe, just maybe, we all win instead, by being together at Christmas, he said. And there on Mount Crumpet, if you had been near it, you would have been able to see it and hear it. The moment his heart grew a few sizes more, to more than his heart had ever grown before. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch and his dog whizzed back down on that sleigh, and the Grinch placed his ornament on the small tree, and he lifted it high so the whole town could see. The Who's all hurrahed, and they jumped to their feet, as the Grinch grinned and said, Now our tree is complete. Then the mayor declared, We have one thing to do, to make it official for Cindy Lou Who. Would you do the honors? He pointed and said, and the Grinch, he himself, placed the crown on her head. I hope you all have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.